Welcome everyone to a rainy, wet Tuesday Makers show and share. As tradition dictates, we're going to start with the show and share portion, and everybody is welcome to share a project, whether it be a total success and you're so proud, or a total failure, as some of mine have been, and you just want to commiserate with others. So either or to ask for help. Any of that is good. We're going to start it off with Isaac and Sprig. Or is that Spring? Spring? Sprig? Sprig.
Have you heard that one before? Maybe some of y'all may recall, I posted something on Mattermost recently about Sprig. It's a relatively new project, a handheld video game machine directed toward young people. It's kind of cool the way they got it set up, because you can go on their website where they've got a code editor and you can write a video game, and there's an emulator that lets you test it and play it right there on their website. And if you share your game with the Sprig community and you're a young person, they send you the video game hardware for free. So hopefully getting some younger generation interested in coding. But if you're an old person like me, they won't send you anything. And in fact, they won't even sell you the darn thing. So I built my own, and I wanted to show you, because I was getting ready to go visit my parents in the middle of absolutely nowhere, I thought this would make life slightly more interesting. So it's pretty simple hardware. It's built around this part, which is the Raspberry Pi Pico you may have seen mentioned. That's their new microcontroller, so it's sort of similar to an Arduino or an ESP32. A very small and humble, simple computer, costs like $4. It's got a little screen, it's got some buttons, obviously, that you control with. There are LEDs up here that they don't seem to be implemented. I don't know, they don't do anything. And then there's underneath the screen a little audio chip, an amplifier, and then on the back, it's got a battery pack, 2 AAA batteries, and then here a little speaker cabinet for noise. Because the project is a free and open project, all the plans are online, and so for me this was just a construction thing. I only deviated from their design in 2 ways. One was I changed the layout to make it a little bit easier for me to assemble, so I moved this thing to the front, and also moved the speaker and the battery on the back so it acts like sort of an ergonomic hand grip. I mean, sort of ergonomic, more than not. The other thing I did was I put a much bigger speaker on it. Because theirs was feeble and I wanted better sounds. And that was a misstep, because what I didn't think about was that my speaker uses a lot more juice. And so when it tries to make epic sounds, you can see the screen dim, and sometimes the game will actually crash because it's run out of electricity. So I'm going to have to work on that a little bit. But it did get me through a week with the parents, so that was a big plus. And I thought I would show you ever so briefly the game that I made, which is just sort of a classic match 3 game along the lines of Bejeweled or Candy Crush or whatever it is the kids play these days. So you're supposed to move your little cursor around and find pieces that you can match up to each other. I doubt I can do this while I talk. And when you do, then they explode and the tiles fall down and all that kind of thing. And of course, because I'm doing it, it's got a horror theme going on. And once I got it going, I just kind of had a good time adding features to it. So I added, a score, and then I added a high score, and then I added the timer so that the game actually has an end to it. But then the most interesting thing for me was adding power-ups. So if you can manage to score 4 tiles, then you get a cross that you can use to banish a group of evil tiles. 5, and you get an hourglass so you can extend your time, and 6 will give you a pentagram, which just totally nukes things. So it was fun to mess with, and after a week of it, I decided it was good enough and I should probably do something else with my life. So I went ahead and shared the game with Sprig, and they've published it on their website, so I'll post a link to it later, and y'all can fool it if you want to. You can even look at my horrible source code if you really want. So I'll pass this thing around. Y'all are welcome to play with it. I enjoyed putting it together. The code is all in JavaScript, which I'm not super excited about. So this may be my one and only game, but we'll see what happens. Thanks.
Thank you, Isaac. Does this mean you're published author, if you will, now? Yeah. Right. Well, let's move along and talk to Tracy with her bowl.
In April of this year, I went to visit my parents in Wisconsin, and I told my dad I wanted to make a project with him while I was there, because he has a wood shop, and I wanted to like work in his wood shop with him. And I wanted to make a bowl on his lathe. So we went up there. I went up there. We started it, but I was only there for a weekend, so I didn't get to finish it. And then it sat at my house for 6 months. And then they came for Thanksgiving, so I knew I had to quickly finish before they got here. Neil is working on setting up the lathe, so as he was been setting it up, he showed me how to use it, and I finished this month. So this is it's made of pine and cherry, and I turned half of it at home in Wisconsin and half of it here. It's a little rough, but I really enjoy it as my first lathe project. And then when my parents were here, I had my dad sign a piece of paper, and I put it on the laser, the project that we did together. So I just had him sign a sheet of paper, and I signed it, and then I took a photo of it and traced it around in the laser and lasered the bottom of it. So I'll pass it around. I really enjoy it.
That's a nice personalization. I didn't realize the laser bed would go up that high.
Yeah, I didn't either until I did it.
All right, learning new things all the time. Let's talk about a table and seat from Sylvana.
I obviously don't have the table with me, so I have something I hope I can show if the phone cooperates. Okay. Hang on a second. Okay. I don't know if you can see. Okay, gotcha. So I moved to my new apartment a year ago, and I had a problem, which was essentially a huge mess in the, let me see if I can make this larger. There we go. So I had a huge mess in the kitchen and a lot of wasted room right at the end, at the entry hall. So I wanted to make something for it. And I'm not very experienced, so I thought it was a good opportunity for me to do some woodworking. And I wanted something that was very easy for me to make, and I also wanted something cheap. So I started looking at the scrap wood pile and looking for inspiration on the internet, and I found this very nice tables that were using different boards with different colors, and also, you know, trying to build a nice board out of it. So I thought that would be a good idea. So I started working on the board. And I don't know if you can see here, but essentially what I did is I collected a bunch of plywood from the scrap wood pile, and I cut them all in the same width. And I tried to organize them in a way that, you know, I liked the colors and the combinations that I was getting. My idea was to glue them all together so that you could see that stripe pattern, but I was afraid that when sitting down or putting weight on the thing, it might, I don't know, somehow break. I didn't trust the glue. So I decided it would be a good idea to put 2 rods across just to make sure that it was reinforced. That was a pain. That was a real pain because I had to cut the 2 holes on each of the pieces and make sure that all the pieces were the same. I made like a pad, how do you call this? Like some padding so that to make sure that I would put them on the press drill in the same position. but it didn't work. So essentially it took a lot of planing and sanding to get it smooth as you see there. And then I glued everything together, and it turned out like what you see there. I also had to put a lot of filling in some holes, but I actually like the roughness of it. So I also did some sideboards and some support for the bottom. I was using super cheap boards from like Home Depot, and those ones that are like very thin little pieces of wood collected together. So I stained them in black, and I mean the picture doesn't do them justice, but you wouldn't say it's cheap wood at all, like cheap pine at all. So this is the result. It looks very nice. Thank you. I don't know if you can see, but I really like the effect of the wood. I oiled it and added some varnish to it to make sure that it's protected, and it really, really, really looks like almost like a huge piece of wood with the little straps. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share. It's my first piece of furniture and my first show and share, so I'm really happy. Thank you.
Did you fill the voids with the plywood as they were upright?
Yeah, I did to some of them because some of the plywood wasn't it wasn't super smooth, and it had like little pieces that were coming off. So those for safety I did, but I actually like that there were some holes in it also with some voids. And it looked very nice. I thought about using epoxy to fill those and kind of preserve them, but I was too lazy, so I didn't do that. But it would be a good improvement.
Thank you so much. Next up, it looks like we're going to continue maybe with the woodworking theme. I'm not sure. We have chairs and bar stools from Jacob. Maybe metal?
A little bit of metal, a little bit of wood. I think of it as a journey through all the different zones, to be honest. So let's see. I think that's fair. So like every good project, you start in Inkscape, I guess, and do a little bit of sketching. I needed to have an idea of how much material I was using, and so basically I was. Let's see, why is that not working? So I was going back and forth between like the math, how much material I was using, and the design. And in the end, I ended up with a design that is kind of in the center, more stable, more legs, a little bit more material, but cheaper material. And eventually, I could go and buy the material. It starts with metal, so the base is in metal. I had a lot of help from different people here, so really helped me to set up the saw without having certification for the zone quite yet. I ended up with 4 nice pieces. First failure, I was taking a stack of nuts because I wanted to have the chair adjustable, and basically as you weld this together, they move a little bit closer, so I had to redo some of these and shim so that I make sure that they have the spacing right so that I can move them on the part. I then took the stack of nuts and put it into the square tubing and closed that off over time, and then kind of sanded everything in the area. So like you get from something that seems ugly at first to something that can turn out relatively pretty. Then we have this Horsfeld bender in the zone, in the blacksmithing zone over there. So I was doing all the legs, and I ended up with a large stack of legs. So I wanted to do 4 bar stools, so a lot of repetitive work. And with that also came the realization that obviously you can't get anything to sub-millimeter precision, so there has to be an approach to have the chairs adjustable. So what I added to the feet of the chairs was a little bit of a thread so that I can screw something on there. Then obviously nothing would be complete without the laser, and I think this was really a good companion, especially because I used it in different parts. So like obviously I created a router template so that I could get the wooden seat out of that, then move over to the router, get off the corners and also round over the corners, and also for some jigging. So you want to have something that is only roughly fit. I needed a rig to basically hold everything together. I only have 2 hands and not enough clamps in the area. So basically I built a little rig where I could have repeatable for the 4 chairs I was building, the spacing, and at the same time kind of coordinate the TIG welder. And then I wanted them to be adjustable. That was kind of why I started the whole endeavor, that like all the adjustable chairs that I was finding, they were too expensive. And I wanted to basically remain in like a cost envelope that was close to the cheapest bar stool I could find, and that would have been something made of wood, $50-ish area. I'll reveal in the end how much I ended up for as a bill of materials. Time, I guess, you can't really make up for. I also wanted a back support, so that's where the hospital bender came back in. Then I welded everything together, and I had to kind of make sure that like all of them are a little bit different, especially with the part where the back support is, so I had to kind of number them and kind of make sure that they end up in the same spot. In hindsight, I would basically probably create the base plate a little larger and just make the back support adjustable with a slot and some screws. And then it's time for first inspection. The inspector is in the bottom right. He didn't like it. The robot wouldn't pass, he mentioned, and like this wooden thingies, he kind of thought like it looked like wine bottle corks. And so back to the shop, adjusting everything a little wider, and then adding a ring as a foot support. So another zone, another bunch of tools that have to come into the project. So we have the tool to bend the rings and then basically weld them together. Then finally for the little wooden pieces, I also needed to create a little jig so that I could use the hand sander. Maybe I could have used the lathe, but I felt like the sander had a nice effect, and basically these are the little pieces I was screwing on. And then I got some help with painting and staining the wood, so we gave it a little bit of a brown tint, and then we blued the metal. So that's a process that basically very quickly oxidizes and then serves a little bit of a rust-resistant layer if you oil it. And then we were up for final inspection, and we were happy. And I brought one here so you can have a look. Oh, yeah, sure. Let me know when it's in. That's good. Yeah, that's the story.
How many zones did you use?
I think it pretty much used all the zones. I don't know.
Where's the fiber?
Where's the
The fiber is not directly in there, but I had to use some tools from the fiber zone.
Better not bend my scissors.
I was thinking about putting a cushion, but we started with only wood, and right now I like it, but maybe at some point it becomes uncomfortable, then I can still add this up with the fiber zone. So like, the bill of materials is about $70.
Each chair was 70
Yeah, something.
with the materials?
Yeah.
And I'll have to ask for Russell, how long did it take?
I started about half a year ago. I was traveling a lot.
Half a year ago.
I think total hours, probably like 4 weekends.
Oh, I'm getting mixed signals here. One says 4 weekends, the other's going, ah. I think it's a wonderful project, and to use so many of the zones. That's why we like it here. You can make things, right? Everything's here for you. All right, so now we have Steve Brown with a circular saw jig for a hardy plank.
A few of you know I am rehabbing a house, and I have ripped off the aluminum siding, which it started with, that was really ugly. show very well, does it? Anyhow. And I'm replacing it with hardy plank. And hardy plank is a cement-based siding material, which is rated the same as brick for insurance purposes and fire protection. But to cut it, you've got planks that are this wide, and you have to use a special saw blade, and you have to use a circular saw. And if you really want a clean cut, doing it without any kind of a guide is kind of a problem. So I guess most people, or most woodworkers are familiar with the idea of oh, come on. Well, okay. Best I can do. I'm sorry, I cannot deal with phones. Most people are familiar with what's called a sled that you use on a table saw to get square cutoffs that slides through the saw. And I built a little jig, which is here across a plank that's like this. I'm simply taking a couple of pieces of plywood that will fit over the hardy board, putting a rail for the saw, and will give me a straight cut off the end. Now, the problem with this is it's not square. So I'm going to have to go back and redo it. But if anybody has looked into using hardy plank as a siding, the people I bought the planking from weren't even aware of these little tools. Let's see if I can get one of these to show up. I don't know why this will not go to a single.
You know, Steve, we can just have you show the tool to the camera.
Well, I was going to show it in use there. Okay. This little guy hooks onto the bottom of a row, and you clamp it, and it gives you a little platform to put the next. You put two of them across, and it makes there's no measuring involved when it comes time to put a new one up.
As long as the first one's level.
Yeah. But these are really slick. They're not all that expensive, and I'll be through with this project sometime in the next year. So if anybody would like to borrow them or purchase them from me, let me know. Get in touch with me. Yes?
What's that tool called?
It's a gecko gauge.
Gecko gauge?
By Pack Tool. And use them they come in pairs, and they're about $70 for a pair.
How does the hardy board attach to the building?
I'm sorry?
How does the hardy board attach to the building?
Just nail it.
Does it take ring shank or a special nail?
I've been using a nail gun with galvanized nails.
The idea behind hardy board is for it to pretty much go up like wood planking or siding on the house, how it's designed.
Yeah.
So the nails go right through easily then?
I wouldn't say easily, but with a nail gun, they go through. I suspect that if you try to hammer them, you have more problems. I haven't really tried that.
Thanks for sharing that guide. That's really useful, both of them. Okay, do we have any other show and shares from people who didn't get to sign up? Yes, come on up.
Figure this out. What's that? Yeah, I might need to refigure this out. You get 3. And then you'll do all 2 take. That's a different screen. Awesome. So, hi, my name's Logan King, and over the past few weeks, I've been experimenting with learning about neural networks. For those unfamiliar, neural networks are a way of programming where, instead of traditional programming, where in order to accomplish a goal, you figure out kind of a specific instructions and a sequence of instructions to go through to determine something. Neural networks are a class of programs where you feed a program a bunch of information and it kind of figures out the rules of how to classify something or do something on its own. So what I've done this week is I've been learning a little bit about neural networks, and one of the walkthroughs of that is how to classify image digits. So this is kind of code I've walked through. The first step here is to download some images online. It's a set of images of hand-drawn digits, and we're going to teach a machine how to determine which digit was drawn. So you can see an example here of some drawn and the answer label, which is the correct answer here. Let's see. And how to make a simple network classify digits has kind of been done a lot, and this is a popular data set to use for that. But something I was wanting to experiment with was I was reading a book lately talking about maybe making systems more intelligent through voting. So what I decided to do for this project was to train multiple neural networks, each of the same architecture, but they all have kind of a different starting point. So they'll think a little bit differently, and then have them all vote at the same time and determine if the answers of the sum of their votes was more intelligent or better, more accurate than each individual network. So let's see. So first here, I create 10 models and train them on the data set. So you can see here, this training's already been done. And this is kind of the accuracy. So at the end of training them, they're getting around 96% accuracy on the digits, which means they're getting 3% of the answers wrong. So up here, 3%, maybe they would have said, this is not a 7, it's something else. and to show you an example of their learning curve. So they get smarter over time, and I only had them train for a little bit, but you can see lines here showing a progression of accuracy from the beginning to later as they have more time to learn. And then here I do a step where I add all their votes together and combine them into one combined model result. And then I print the accuracy of that. So when all the models come together and vote, they have about a 97.95% accuracy. And previously, all the individual models, you can see here, they had 95 to 97.42, it looks like is the highest one. So combining the models and making the vote, giving us 97.95 does give us a more accurate answer than any individual model could give, but it is, not amazingly different. I guess the difference between when you only have about 4% left, maybe a percent increase is significant. And then at the bottom, to show you some examples here of this working, I asked the machine to show me examples of classification where it had low confidence, or the combined model did. So here is a number. This is a hand-drawn digit from the data set, and the correct answer of this would be a 5. And the combined model's results, it's pretty confident it's a 5. It might be a 6, but 5 is the most likely. And this is the combined prediction results are taken from adding up other models' prediction results. To show you an example of those, this first model thought it was probably a 6, which is incorrect. The second model also thought it was a 6, and this third one thought it was a 5. So there are a few more than 3 that were voting, but to show you an example of how they vote differently, by adding them up, you can get a more accurate result. And then we have a few other answers here. So this should be a 9, and it thinks it is, but there's a little question there. This is a 4, and it thinks it's more of a 6 than a 2, or a 2. It doesn't actually guess 4, but neural networks are hard, so. Questions?
Yeah, in the neural network, you just show it a bunch of 9s and say, yes, this is a 9, and a bunch of 7s and 7. So it knows what the proper answer can be?
Yeah, so basically you design a machine that can learn, which is the hard part. And then after you've done that, you basically show it a bunch of labeled data. So you show it a bunch of images of 1s, and you tell it these are all 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s. And over time, it just learns to figure out the rules on its own, which if I go up to that chart again, this is a model of, there's 10 lines here that I was training 10 models, but you can see how their accuracy goes up over time. And also something you want to do to know that it's not just memorizing the inputs, it's actually generalizing to new data it hasn't seen before. You want to separate training data from data used for validation later on. So in my example, I have 60,000 images that it trains on, and then later I have 10,000 images to test more accurately how it's actually learning and performing that it's never seen before.
How long does it take to go through those cycles?
On this model, not very long. I trained 10, and I trained 10 models, and I showed them each number 3 times, and that probably took a minute. So these are very small models, but when you get up to state of the art, you can have much larger models, and you can have, server farms of compute needed in a while.
When you get down to the end product, does all the smarts, can you put all the smarts on a
Mhm.
you get access to
Yeah.
the cloud?
So it's a good question. Generally for neural networks, training them takes a lot of compute power, but running them after they've been trained and have learned is rather cheap. So, any questions from anyone else in the back?
Yeah, so what was this written in, and
Mhm. So this is written in Python, and I'm using the Keras library for interacting with, or for writing neural networks. Keras is built on top of TensorFlow, and TensorFlow is more mathematical tensor operations, and Keras is specifically for neural networks.
and then just
Um,
a follow-up question, have you ever considered like possibly putting in one bad actor if you're neural networks to see if like
Maybe. You can obviously see that some results are, whether they were trying to be bad actors or not, just wrong. Like here, this one is very confident it's a 5, and these two think it's a 3, more so. So the correct answer was 5 here, but there's already mixed signals. But that might be something worth experimenting in the future. One more question?
yeah, on your accuracy graph, there's one line that just about is out. Do you know why it did that?
On here. So sometimes when training, validation can actually go down after a training step. And if I trained it longer, it would probably increase to where the others are. These are all the same architecture, so that's expected. But sometimes it gets worse before it gets better. So, all right. If there's any more questions, I'll take them afterwards, after the presentation. Cool.
Thank you. That's quite interesting. Yeah, so next, let's go for you in the front.
I have been sewing all my life, and I like a challenge when it... I've been sewing all my life, and I really like a challenge, so I never make anything that's easy. So when I found this fabric, I saw that it had this great pattern, it had this Western feel to it, and I had to have it. It's 100% wool. But there's always a question of matching a pattern. So if you'll come here, what I do is I lay out the fabric on my big work table, and I examine the pattern for repeats. A pattern can be every 12 inches or every 6 inches or every 3 yards. So you have to learn the fabric. And then when you do, and you decide what you want, what you want to make, which this is a simple wrap jacket. Now, if you see how if you look here, the arm pattern blends in with the stripes on the sides. And if you look at the front, the pattern moves to complement its both sides. So, and then of course the back, the pattern is completely matched up. So that's the big challenge when you're trying to make a couture garment, is to make it look exceptional. So when I did the collar, I cut the fabric at a 45-degree angle on both sides, so now you have that kind of a wedge shape. So the jacket itself is, took me about 20 hours just because of the patterns alone. Making it was a snack.
So I often call that fussy cutting, when you
Oh.
want it to go just right.
Yes, yes. I've been doing it a long time, so I'm pretty confident. But This fabric was $50 a yard. So a mistake would have been horrible.
How many yards did it take?
Well, because of the odd pattern that it is, it took 5 yards. That's, this pattern itself would only take 3.
But
So-
you get the repeats.
Yeah, you have to work with that repeat all the time. So that was the challenge, and I enjoyed making it. It's wool is a beautiful fabric. It's very forgiving. It's easy to work with. But nowadays, most people just use fleece. It's a lot cheaper, and it's made in China. But if you ever really care about what you're wearing, you'd look for garments like these.
Thank you. Oh, I think we're getting every zone here. How about you?
Thank you very much. My name's Andy. I'm still a prospective member. And this here is, oh no. This here is a spinning circle. You are welcome. Oh, okay. This here is Fantasy Flat Track Roller Divas. Fantasy Flat Track Roller Divas. I'm really into 2 things. I'm really into 3 things. I'm really into painting, 3D miniatures, and roller derby. I can't play roller derby. I don't know how to skate. But I can, and I don't know how to model in my in Blender, but I do know how to just rig up something that does exist already. So the hardest part, I think. Well, I guess I'll have to do them. Maybe I'll just do like one team at a time. So here are what I'm tentatively calling the Jotunheim Valkyries. These are the Beelzebabes. Yep. Another one in here. Oops, excuse me. 5th Beelzebub. The Beelzebabes, they escape for your soul. Hell is an MLM, so they need downstream. These are the Rad Canyon Shredders. Goblins, they die easy in the pits, so they tend to come in twins. They're my favorite. This took a lot of, I guess, like trial and error, especially when it came to the detail on the skates. That didn't exist on any of these people. These are all football players, fantasy football players. And I found some skates, but you see, they're like comically oversized, the wheels on these, because the normal sized wheels and my little clippers and my shaky hands just came out boots every time. So I had to go back in there and do a lot of like resizing and then like learn how to rig the bodies to kind of like, I need that knee a little bit higher. So that, and then painting them was a blast. I kind of learned a hard lesson when it came to the shading. I did everybody in a black undercoat with a zenithal highlight in white. And I think I should have just been way more generous with the zenithal highlighting, because when I come back over there with an airbrush of a thin kind of like a glaze layer, like on it really pops if it's like a light color and you've really got white, lots of a rich white undercoat. So you kind of get like a shadowy thing that, like, see, it looks really great right here where I spammed it with all the white. And I just, lesson learned, do more of that. But I really like that. I like her so much. The next step is to come up with rules. So, and gather alpha testers. So if you like, that's Fantasy Flat Track Roller Derby. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions. Oh, if I ever learned to like make them, like myself, I think I could sell that. But these are like such a rip-off and a kit bash. Like I couldn't sell it. Yeah.
How did you get them actually physically made?
I have a 3D printer. I have an Elegoo Mars 2 Pro, and I use their plant-based paint. Their plant-based resin. It comes in clear green, which when you prime it, it comes out just as nice as anything else. But when you need a spooky portal, you've got clear green, so it's pretty. It's neat. Yeah, I sliced them all in the default slicer that comes with it, Chidubox. It does the job. Any other questions? Great. Thanks, everyone.
Those are great. Any other shares? Well, then I think that's an excellent lead in to the first announcement of the night. Cooper.
Hey guys, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm Cooper. I'm the 3D printing czar, and I'm really excited to tell everybody that the resin printer is up and running. And so to start out, what I'm going to do is basically just anybody that has experience with resin printers, come to me and we'll have a conversation tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and just pre-authorize as many people as I can so that we can just get it in use. Right now we've got some water washable resin, and I'm very pleased to report that the resin did not smell up the area nearly as bad as I was afraid it could. So I don't think that we're going to have any problems with this. See if I can zoom in. Yeah. So the detail that came out on this thing is just astounding, especially for me that I pretty much do all of my 3D printing on FDM machines. So this is actually kind of my first introduction into this, and it's turned out really awesome. Kind of the second half of this announcement is, since we've had so many 3D printers getting donated recently, I've decided to rework the enclosure in the 3D printing area a little bit so that we can fit more printers into it. And I kind of just wanted to put out an open invitation to anyone that has experience with the laser cutter or 3D printing and is interested in helping out with that. I've kind of found that I just don't have enough time in the week to steadily do a ton of work on that on top of everything else. So I want to see if I can kind of get some people that want to join in on this and delegate a few tasks out to everybody. And I think that, that can help you if you want to learn anything about 3D printing or laser cutting. You can kind of team up with the people that help out, and hopefully everyone can join in and we can get this done a little bit faster. But that was kind of all I had. But yeah, anyone that has experience with a resin 3D printer and would want to use ours, it is an Elegoo Saturn, by the way, so it's got a slightly larger build area than most smaller resin printers. So yeah, anybody that wants to get a little pre-authorization and have a conversation about that, just come see me right after this. Yeah, question in the back? Yeah, so the most common type of 3D printers are called FDM printers, which is fused deposition modeling. And essentially what that is just a hot glue gun that the machine can move around in 3 dimensions. And you hear people talk about slicers. You basically take your object and you break it into a bunch of layers on just 2-dimensional images stacked on top of each other. And the machine will basically just draw each layer one on top of the other. The way that these resin 3D printers work, they're called masked stereolithography printers. And basically what you have is a resin that starts out as a liquid, but when you expose it to UV light, it cures into this harder plastic. And so instead of having to move around a tool end and draw the entire layer at a time, it has a screen in the bottom of it, and it simply projects the entire layer as an image. So they can actually go a lot faster, and they sort of open up, number one, as cheap as electronics and screens are getting, this thing has a 7-inch screen that I think is 4K resolution, so it's an insanely high pixel density. And so you can just get unbelievable print resolution. It doesn't show up on the camera, but there's text on the top of this piece that is clearly readable to the naked eye that you would just have no hope of getting close to on the typical 3D printers that we have here. So especially for things like tabletop miniatures and just little things that have a lot of detail, you can get those done much quicker and in much higher detail. Yeah, another question?
Materials cost from that versus
So the material cost is generally about the same. I find that $20 to $30 per kilogram of material seems to be constant across FDM printers, where you're buying it in spools of weed eater string, basically, versus if you're buying a liter jug of the resin. So it's you know, it's pretty inexpensive, and so it, you know, it's not going to be like people are getting charged like crazy to use this or anything.
How long did it take to build that?
So this one took about 3 hours to print. It did have a lot of support material. It wasn't printed standing up like you normally would on most 3D printers. It's kind of suspended up in the air for a lot of complicated reasons. But one thing that's kind of cool about these is when you're printing small objects like these, they're not that much faster than normal 3D printers. But what's nice is that whether something is just a teeny tiny little piece, or if it takes up the entire build volume, it takes the same amount of time per layer regardless of the size, because it's flashing the entire image all at once. So especially if someone was interested in talking about selling miniatures on Etsy or something like that, it would benefit you to just stuff as many of these things as close together as you possibly could, and it would take the same amount to print as just a single one of them, provided it's the same height. So there's definitely a lot of new capabilities with this thing that I'm really excited about.
Do you have to worry about running out of material in the middle of the print?
So that does kind of present a different challenge. Most 3D printers, as they're getting nicer, will come with some kind of filament runout sensor so that it'll sort of pause itself and you can put more filament in. But with these things, you sort of fill up a vat of liquid resin. And as far as I know, I believe some of the slicers can track how much of that material you're using, and you kind of just have to schedule it to pause every so much material used, and you're going to have to manually refill it. But given the nature of high detail, smaller prints, as far as I know, most people don't run into that issue very often. But if that's it, yeah, I appreciate you guys listening, and I'm excited to get this going and get talking with everybody about it.
I think there's a lot of people excited about it from all the chatter on Mattermost. Oh, yeah. Are there any other announcements? Tracy, Isaac? No. There's one that I'd like to bring up, and I thought about it a couple weeks ago. We haven't had this issue for a while, but now that more and more people are coming, we used to have a problem with people parking all the way to the end. Well, the problem with that is then you can't get to the far side to park or get out. So if it's starting to get too close to the trash container over there, try and leave space and go around or park out by the blacksmith shop. So just a little public announcement there. The only other thing I have are some classes. So tonight we're going to have the new members onboarding. You're welcome to stay and listen to that. It's good if you're your first time here to hear more about our organization, or if you'd like to get a refresher on our organization, you're welcome to stay as well. In the past, you've had donuts. I don't know if, no, okay, yeah. Maybe I'll just go back to my zone. And as just as a reminder, you need to have the new members onboarding in order to get through your probation period and get a key to the space. So then Thursday night we have Machining 101. I think there's 3 tickets left. And that's the authorization for the machine shop. Okay? But then if you want to go further, we have the mill authorization. There's only 1 ticket left there. And for the wood authorization on Monday, December 5th, there's 8 tickets left. So if you want to use the wood shop, make sure and get signed up for the wood auth class. The milling class was Saturday on the 3rd. All of these events are on a calendar. So if you go to knoxmakers.org and go to events, you can see all the events that are coming up. And with that, I'll ask for a couple of volunteers to help with the trash. Do we need the filters changed? Maybe, maybe. All right, great. At least check them. Thank you. And with that, let's go make.